Hey guys, Jared here, Magnetic Men's Club. Hope everyone's having an amazing day. I went through a divorce 8 years ago, maybe a little bit more now. And one of the reasons why I got into coaching men specifically around divorce, bad breakups, and then just getting themselves back out there was some of the challenges that I actually went through myself. So I need you to understand that you're not alone in this. If you're going through a divorce or maybe that separation process where, you know, the vultures, I call them, the attorneys are coming in and they're trying to split assets, and, you know, you have this judge who's going to be pro-woman 90% of the time. The challenges that men have going through this process far exceed those that women go through. And so when I went through my divorce, the very first thing that I started feeling that I had a loss of, my loss of identity. I worked a lot. I was primarily the breadwinner. Now she worked, but I was primarily the breadwinner, and I worked all the time. And our social circles, for the most part, were merged together. Sort of grew up together. Maybe you guys can identify with this. Where we were young, she had her group of friends, I had my group of friends. And as that marriage kind of progressed, those friends sort of merged together. We started going through that separation, and that was leading to a divorce. I started noticing that her social group, which was my social group, they more gravitated towards her. And also some of my quote unquote high school friends, they sort of shied away from me altogether. And I had this loss of identity because I was like, you know, we've been friends, I've been helping you, you've been helping me, we've been friends for so long, and all of a sudden, just because me and my wife are going through a divorce, we can't be friends. And so I had to develop a new social circle, a new social network, and that's hard when you're older. Most of the time, the people that you know you're friends with, you're generally going to be friends with them a lot longer, build bonds with them. So it is harder to gain new friends during a separation and a divorce, or kind of setting your life over. But I had to do that because largely most of my friends that I thought were my friends kind of vanished. And I also had this feeling that I had this loss of my reputation. You know, society, although it is changing a lot, society does view married men as more responsible than single men. And I did have a reputation of, you know, he's a married man, he's a businessman. I was always a good father. She never said once that I was a bad father. We had, you know, split custody and all that. Never was that an issue. But I did have like this sense of loss of my reputation. One moment I was a married man, the next I was a divorced man, single man. And so maybe you're struggling with that right now. Maybe because women are more social, because they talk more and they confide more into their girlfriends and friends, they have a better outlet than we do. They have generally better communication skills. They're more emotional. They can get out. They can kind of just get out their frustrations. Where men, we kind of bottle it in. We kind of bottle everything up, which isn't healthy. I did that for years. And because we lose our friends or we lose that social circle, we feel isolated. We have this feeling of isolation. We have this feeling that we're alone in this. I also felt that, especially for maybe, the first 6 months or so. I didn't really have a lot of friends I could talk to, or that I thought at the time I couldn't talk to. And I just remember sitting a lot of the nights when I didn't have my kids home, and I started noticing I was drinking more. I started noticing that I was not going to the gym as much as I used to. I started checking out in life. I was like, man, I just don't want to do anything. And so maybe you feeling that now, maybe you have felt that and you can understand that. Drinking more, or I never got into other drugs, but entertaining more substance abuses, pot, cocaine, things like this. It's really just a coping tool that I was using to get over my divorce, or to fill that hole or fill that time that I was kind of having alone. And instead of using that time productively, instead of using that time reading books, maybe listening to podcasts, maybe getting into a program where other men were going through divorce where I could confide in them, I started drinking more. And then I started going out more and to clubs and, different bars and stuff. And I've always had a pretty good ability to pick up girls. And I started noticing I was basically whoring myself out. And to a lot of guys, you think, that's awesome, that's great. It gets really old. Having just random sex, number one, increases your probability of getting STDs. Could get somebody pregnant even though I was clipped. You also even ruin your own value. So I was worried about my reputation being a married man, now a single man. Now my reputation was, this guy's a player. This guy, he's not in it for the long term at all. So then my reputation started going down a little bit more, especially I'm in a very small town. All of this was just filling this emptiness inside of me. And it wasn't until I found a good peer group, first it was a coach, and then the coach brought me into this peer group, that I started noticing that other men were going through the same problem. They started noticing, and these guys were all drinking, some of these guys were doing drugs, some of these guys were partying, and it was filling a hole, but it was temporary. And because they were doing this in excess, they started having health problems. They started missing work. They started missing appointments with their children, which caused other problems. And so I'm thankful I found this coach early on, because it was only about 6 months I kind of entertained this. And I got into a good coaching program. We developed a good coaching program. Go to www.magneticmenclub.com. We have a brand new app coming out. You can interact with us on a daily basis. We give you homework, we can give you assignments. You can jump on a coaching call with me or some of the other coaches. We want to let you guys know that you're not alone. Divorce happens all the time. These situations come up and there's a better way to handle them. We want you to be magnetic. We want you to rebuild your life. We want you to rebuild your life even better than during the marriage. We want you to have an amazing life. Alcohol abuse, that was definitely a challenge for me. Having, questionable sex, that was definitely an issue with me. Another thing was just my financial impact. Not only was I moving into a new place that I had, rent, all the utilities, food, all this. On top of that, we have child support that we still have to pay. And you typically have what's called maintenance or alimony. I guess depends on what state you live in, but alimony. So generally the man's lifestyle can drastically change because of all of these new bills that come in. Women can suffer too, but I'm talking specifically about men. There's a lot of men that I coach, they actually live with their parents now because they just can't afford their own place, plus the child support, plus the alimony, and all these other new living arrangements that they have to make. So they made the choice to move in with their parents in order to start saving up some money in order to kind of get back on their feet. And that in and of itself can be defeating. As a man on your path and purposes, once a married man with your own house and your kids and the white picket fence, you have to swallow your pride to go live at your parents' house. That sends shockwaves through a man's ego having to do that. The financial impact can also lead to thoughts of depression, anger. Why does she get to have all this shit? Why does she get to live in the house and I have to move out and all this? A lot of guys have a lot of anger associated with divorce and how the process works. If you are going out, you're spending your money in the wrong places, and maybe you're jacking up your credit cards to do it just to have a good time, just to have a laugh, you're putting yourself deeper and deeper into the hole. So a lot of men are very financially strapped when they're going through the divorce, and it could be years after because of the child support, because of the alimony. I was a good father, and I still am a good father. My kids still live with me right now. But when you're used to seeing your kids every day and talking to them and hanging out with them and going to events and all of this stuff, and then really half of the month you don't get to see them, that can be very defeating for a man, especially if you had the type of ex who will use the kids as a weapon against you. Maybe you're going through this now where she's holding kids hostage. If you don't do this, you're not going to see them. And, or if you don't come on Friday at exactly 3 o'clock, you don't get to see them for the whole weekend or some bullshit. I've heard horror stories that women do this. And so that can be very frustrating for the guy. It can be you can be pissed. And most of the time, there's not much you can do about it because you have some fucking judge who basically gives her full control of the kids and basically gives her an a la carte on whatever the hell she wants to do. And so if she doesn't want to see the kids, you're forced to actually go back to court to fight her, which costs you more money that you don't have, which costs you more time that maybe you're working 2 jobs now to afford all this. Do you see how the cycle can be very defeating for a man? It was for me. Again, it wasn't so much in not seeing them. She was very good about that. And oftentimes I watched them more or hung out with them more. We had a good relationship. We had a good dialogue with that. So it really wasn't an issue for me. But a lot of the men I coach right now or have coached, this has been a huge issue. So we've dealt with that identity crisis. We've dealt with this loss of identity. We've dealt with this feeling of loss, feeling of isolation, especially when my kids weren't around. It was very hard for me. I ended up drinking more. I ended up going out more, doing some things. Thank God I didn't get sick or anything like that, but doing some things I'm not proud of. And on top of all this, I lost my social network. I lost my wife, who we used to talk all the time. She was a big emotional support for me. I lost that. And so you start getting this feeling of isolation. You start getting this feeling of loneliness, and you do tend to do some of these nefarious things. And all the while, this could lead to something even worse: suicide. Now, I don't want to get involved too much with this, but there are statistics based around this that the suicide rate for men is the highest, not specifically on age group, but during the period of divorce. This is a huge trigger for men who often self-delete because of all of these pressures now put on them over divorce. The increase in alcohol, men just have more access to guns than women do, and we're much more quick with our decisions. And so all of these things, I have felt these. I have had these thoughts about a year, 6 months to a year after my divorce. I started feeling like this, like, fuck, I'm working my ass off just to afford these payments. I'm living on my own. I have all of these other bills to pay. I only see my kids half of the time. It was literally robbing Peter to pay Paul for a while, and I had these thoughts, especially when I was drinking, especially when I was in those dark corners of my mind when nobody was around and I couldn't talk to anybody. I had these thoughts. This is why I want you guys to, if you're having experienced any of this, if you're really going through and struggling right now, book a call with me, get onto our website. I want to help you go through this process. I want you to get into a good peer coaching. Maybe if it's just not with me, I'll find you somebody in your area. I don't want you guys to take permanent steps indefinitely in your life for something that is temporary. Divorce is temporary. You will get through it. You will find your way through it. Your kids are there. They need you. There is a path out of this. And I want to help you create your own path forward. I want to help you create a blueprint for your life going forward that you can get past divorce and even thrive after that. With that, my name is Jared Schoonmaker. If you found this video helpful, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when new videos are being dropped every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, I believe. With that, have a good day. Talk soon.